Hey, I am so super pumped. We've been having some pre-show conversation, and I am super excited about the guest we have on our show today. I'm a huge fan, and as I always explain up front, I know what the Bible says about when they said they called Jesus great, and he said, wait, why do you call me great? There's none great but the Father. But when I use the term today, you know where I'm coming from. And so I have a great admiration for this man. And anyway, so you have reached Other Things with Will Denton. And I'm your host, Kenny Price. Also on the show today is going to be my son, who's going to join us in conversation, and possibly my other son, who's doing dad duty right now. But let me just say, first of all, welcome to Will, because whoever's talking is where the camera goes. So, Will, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am coming to you live from the Great American Hotel Room. I'm in St. Joseph, Missouri tonight, and for real, did it work out? That it worked out for us to, have this conversation from the road. I guess all of them are from the road for everyone in a way. But I was glad that the scheduling worked out, and I'm excited to be here. Very, very grateful that you guys asked. So,
well, we're grateful. Let me give an introduction here real quick. And I ask people, how do you want to be introduced? And even within what Will sent me is a lot of indication about the type of guy Will is. And we're going to get more into that. But this is what he says about himself. It's very modest, that Will Denton is a journeyman drummer with a 30-year career in Christian and country music. He is husband to his singer-songwriter. I put that in there. He's husband to his singer-songwriter wife, Sweet Becky. Yeah. And he's the father to Olivia, Elizabeth, Celia, and Will. Mm-hmm. And Will is currently drumming on and producing his wife Becky's albums. And you can find out more about her at beckydenton.com. And I'll have links to that in the show notes. Is that correct, Will?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And also, and something I found out, that he is drumming with a Tom Petty tribute band, which I'm a huge fan of, Tom Petty, the Heart Shakers. And so he is a pro drummer extraordinaire. But anyway, let's please welcome Will Denton.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, Sweet Becky is a fitting moniker for her. She's a precious lady for sure. I mean, she married me.
Is her name actually Sweet Becky, or it's Becky and you added the sweet?
I might have added the sweet, but for what it's worth, she routinely comes aboard and sings with the Heart Shakers, the tribute band that we just mentioned. Nice. And everybody in the band calls her Sweet Becky. They actually introduce her as Sweet Becky. So I'm just like, I couldn't agree more. So I've been saying it a lot lately. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Now
she doesn't call me Sweet Will.
Yeah, it just doesn't go the same way, does it?
It's weird, huh? Yeah.
Well, so Will, on the Heart Shakers, I noticed that it's got a pretty good lineup of people that you play with. Tell us a little bit about your tribute band right now.
Oh yeah. Well, let's see. So the core of that would be the lead singer. Anyone who has the gumption to try to be Tom Petty, my hat's off to them. And our Tom Petty is one of my dearest and oldest friends from way back in my college days in Nashville. His name's Ty Smith. He's a good old Southerner like me. He's from Mississippi, and Ty has I think it's fortunate blessing of pretty much looking like Tom Petty's love child. He looks exactly like Tom Petty. And I told him in college, I'm like, Ty, man, you have got to do a Tom Petty tribute band someday. I mean, you are him already. And we kind of, yeah. And now Ty is one of those, we came up, through Belmont University together, both doing music. We both kind of launched out into our, respective careers. Ty is one of those drummers that is actually a fantastic player. He can also sing while he plays drums. I cannot do that. I am more like Animal on the Muppet Show, and I can barely catch my breath after the second chorus. So Ty, though, plays with a lot of finesse, a lot of pocket, and he can sing. So, I knew that at some point, this would come to fruition. So Ty is the lead singer, and let's see, the bass player. These are all my friends. This is what's so wild. It's so fun to make music with guys you have a history with, and just have loved and respected for a long time. So the bass player is my dear friend Mark Childers. Mark is the long time, maybe 18 or 19 years now, musical director for Carrie Underwood, and prior to that, he was a very prominent figure in Christian music. He and his brother Mike, who is a great drummer, they were kind of like this, just team, this rhythm section that just played gig to gig to gig to gig. They were always, wherever I was, I would see those guys play, and I always dug Mark's playing, and I love him as a person too. And he's our bass player. The guitar player is a fantastic guy. Greg Hagan, whom I've also known since college, and Greg is the musical director for Leanne Rhymes, one of my old gigs. He's been with Leanne forever, and he is an integral part of her sound. He is a world-class guitar player and singer himself. It's kind of phenomenal to hear him do a Don Henley cover. You would not believe how convincing he can be. And then Jonathan Hamby, who I went to, guess what, Belmont with, and have known since then. He's currently the musical director for Amy Grant's, been with her for a long time. He also has played with like Carrie and just so many people. So I feel very fortunate, and frankly, the lowest rung on the ladder, musically, to get to play with these guys. And we just have a lot of fun. I mean, the music itself is just unbelievably great to play. And I do feel like, it's being played at a really high level. We've just been having so much fun and have been surprised at the response we've gotten. And then the absolute icing on the cake is Sweet Becky comes out and sings with us. And my wife does a mean Stevie Nicks, let me just tell
that's
you.
awesome.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Stop dragging my heart around.
Exactly. Kind of kills it. Yeah. And it's just anytime I get to be on stage with her, that's a fun thing too. So yeah, I mean, the idea of a tribute band, I think it's one of the most fun things I've been able to do, lately, besides just playing my wife's music and us doing our little duo thing that we do, which is immensely fun as well. So I feel real fortunate. I can just jump in right now and just tell you, music is not my full-time profession at the moment. And there's a lot of mixed feelings about that. However, it is nice to be able to sort of cherry pick the music that you do want to play and do the things that you do want to do without feeling like, hey, where's my next paycheck coming from? And where's my next gig? And just, it's one of the more interesting gigs that I've been doing recently as well is it's so random, but a wonderful guitar player from LA I met years and years ago named Andrew Doolittle. He has for a long time now been the musical director for Rita Wilson, who's probably known quite well as the actress Rita Wilson. But she turns out is a fantastic. Tom Hanks' wife. And so turns out she's a fantastic singer-songwriter as well. She's not some Hollywood, starlet that said, well, it's time to make my record now. And, she actually is really talented and gifted. And so for about 4 years now, I have had the good fortune of playing for her as well whenever she comes and does stuff like in Nashville. I know she has an LA band, she has a New York band, and for whatever reason, I get to be a part of her Nashville band. And yes, it's kind of cool that Tom comes and hangs out. And Tom is just he is a musician's musician himself. He loves to talk music, and it's a little bit surreal. I know we're all just people. I get it, but it's kind of like I'm talking to Forrest Gump here, and he's just.
I was gonna say, do you ever wave at him
nice
like
people.
this?
Yes. No. Can you imagine? Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That is one gig where I try my level best to not fanboy and just try to be as normal. I have to remind myself, okay, don't say anything dumb. Don't say anything dumb. Just be normal, Will. Just be normal.
Yeah.
So, but thankfully, they're super nice people. So.
Well, I saw the video where Carrie Underwood came on stage, and I thought, well, that's cool. She was in the audience in the venue you were in, but so it makes sense because you said which one is her musical director? Which of
the bass player, Mark? Yes.
Okay. That's all. That I tell you, Will, that's a God story, isn't it? Just the whole thing what you're sharing with me. Hey, let me ask you this. So, you talked about, some of the other things, lover of books, smoking of meats, which my whole family, all the Price boys were master smokers. And so before we kind of get further into the heart of things, which we already are, but tell us, so you love smoking meats. What's your favorite cut of meat? What do you like to do?
Okay, I'm so proud. The timing of this interview is just perfect because I've had this for over a year now. Okay, I've had it was my sweet Becky. She gave me a wonderful Christmas present, Pit Boss pellet grill, and and I have been slowly climbing the ladder of what I consider to be the challenges in smoking meats, and I guess it's been about a month now. I'm still kind of floating from it because it actually was not a complete disaster, but I finally successfully smoked my first brisket. Okay. I've been doing burgers and ribs and, chicken, and I've done all the stair steps. Man, I did a brisket for the first time. It was sublime, and it was an 18-hour cook. I had no idea. Woo! I turned it on, at 8:30 that night, and it was so weird to leave the grill on while you go to bed. I actually woke up at 2:30 on purpose to go check on it and make sure the house was not on fire, and it wasn't. And it was just low and slow, 200 degrees, and I got it to like about 165 temperature, and then I wrapped it in butcher paper. Man, I had the best time with it. I was a bundle of nerves the whole time, but I've been watching guys on YouTube like Meat Church and Kent Wallace. There's so many guys that have their opinions about how to do it right. And in fact, that reminds me, many years ago, I went to a barbecue festival, and I know they have them everywhere, but this one was in Tennessee at the Jack Daniel's distillery in Lynchburg, and it was one of those things you pay a ticket and then you can eat everything. You just go crazy. And you'd go up to one truck and you get a small plate, and all the other guys over there just trash talking. Oh man, let me show you how ribs are really done. Come over here, And so I have found myself rather gingerly stepping into this world, not where I feel like I'm one of those at that level yet, because to be honest, I didn't trim the brisket the way I should have. I did not. It was good, but I didn't do a great job. That's hard to do, is trimming a brisket and all that fat away. But overall, it turned out superb. I gave a lot away to some neighbors, and one of my next door neighbors actually told all of her friends that I may have a career ahead as a pitmaster or something. So, I love it. I love the smell. I love the process. I love that it just, if you are in a hurry, you can make it happen fairly quickly. But man, nothing's better to me than just low and slow, like cooking something for 6 hours, 8 hours, and reaping the benefits after that. So, gosh, now I'm hungry, y'all. I really am.
I was gonna say, my mouth is watering just thinking about that. What do you think it is that makes it feel like such a sense of accomplishment? Because at the end of the day, it's just a piece of meat.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question that probably probes much further into the human psyche than one would think. But for me, it ties into something primal, I suppose. Providing and going out, and I didn't kill that cow for sure, but bringing it home and feeding my family with it and everything. But honestly, for me, that everything else that I've done, I was nervous about, but nothing like this. Not the least of which is just brisket, such an expensive cut of meat, and you better not blow it, But it's also that I knew that it's kind of the upper echelon of grilling, and I had done all the prep. I had watched so many videos. I knew how I was going to navigate, my path on this, and the seasonings, everything. And So I just felt like I was kind of the whole every step of the way. But let me tell you a little known fact, not little known, but one of the other benefits of smoking a brisket is the tallow that you get, the liquid gold.
Yeah.
I have after it was all said and done, I've rendered all the fat, in the smoker as well. And I had this gigantic jar of the best, like, I've been cooking everything in it, like eggs, just everything since I've gotten. I'm almost out, so it's definitely time to do it with a brisket. But for me, it's a lot of mental challenges. But there's, the grill does most of the work. You just have to do all the prep work properly and just kind of tend to it. You're constantly returning. I really tried my best to not lift up the lid too much, but just even checking the thermometers, it's just like this process of like seeing something, start one way and end the other. And wow. I feel like I just had a therapy session. Thank you.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So there's something very satisfying about it.
Well, let me say, we would have you lift your right hand, but we're going to make you honorary anyway. An honorary Texan. I know that Tennessee claims a mean brisket, and Kansas City can't claim, St. Louis. I tell you, I was in St. Louis for a meeting one time and heard about the St. Louis barbecue, and I thought, oh my goodness, it's terrible. But anyway, but so we make you an honorary member of the Texas Smokehouse Club. What's that?
You're on video saying that.
What's that? My wife's talking to me off camera here.
It's official. Sounds like, yeah.
Well, my dad came to Christ 2 weeks before he passed away at the age of 78.
Mm-hmm.
And, but he was a master pit boss before that was even a thing. But I used to just be amazed because he had a big old huge propane tank that was welded to the back end of an old Willis Jeep trailer that they had out at the deer lease out in West Texas. And he would sit there, and I'd go out there as a kid with these briskets. And, back then, he drank a lot. So he'd be sitting out there in the country and drinking and smoking. And I'm just thinking he's going to ruin this brisket. I just knew he was. And I'd like, don't you think you ought to check it? He looked at me like, don't worry about it. But you're going to burn it. You're not. Yeah. But you use that term, what do you say, low and slow. So that's it. But you hit the nail on the head. But we'll extend an offer to you right now. If you come into Tennessee and to Nashville, we'll have a shindig to honor you and Sweet Becky and any of your kids that you want to bring or friends. Awesome. And we'll have it at Colton's house, and he's got a big green egg, the big green egg.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, we're going to do a new segment that I'm going to try to add to other things with, because I thought, I'm going to try Chat GPT to see if it has anything to say about Will Denton as far as bio. And I warned Will about this.
Sure, yeah. And for what it's worth, I hate to sound so terribly archaic. I haven't done anything with AI that I'm aware of, at least. I mean, I haven't tried to interact with anything or whatever. So I am completely in the dark and frankly a little curious to see what some artificial intelligence would say about me.
Well, and what's cool, Elon Musk was a co-founder of ChatGPT. It was open source. He's out of it, getting ready to start his own thing. But let me give some background as Colton comes, kind of formally on board here, because this is a cool story, and it's about Will Denton. But we were living in Texas. My kids were young, had them in music, and we heard that Tate, Michael Tate, was going to be at Paris, Texas for a World Vision tour. And so huge DC Talk fan, huge Tate fan when he came out with the solo stuff. So a friend of mine is the one who made me aware of it. And so we caravanned out there with a bunch of us to Paris, Texas, which is kind of nowhere. Okay. But it was, I think, at First Baptist Church, Paris, Texas. So what's cool, and I want to have Jeff Moore from Jeff Moore in the Distance back in the day, but he was the MC, and, he's the songwriter, vocalist. And it was cool to see Jeff and Tate, and there was a girl who I can't remember now who was actually getting the most airplay at the time, and this drummer. Okay, I didn't know it was the drummer from DC Talk, and so anyway, so we're sitting there with a girl that was on the show. She goes to a song, and it's just piano, and my wife reaches over and nudges me, and she said that drummer's accompanying her. I said, he is. It's not a track. And she said, yeah, it's the drummer. And I said, well, wait. She said, well, look, he's turned around. It looks like he's playing a controller off of his laptop. I said, well, that's what we're trying to get our kids to be able to do. So at the halftime, everyone came out. They were doing kind of just a break. And so Tate went out and was signing stuff at his merch table. And you came walking out. Nobody's talking to you. And I said, hey, man. I said, well, no. I said, hey, man, I said, I really enjoyed seeing you do what you're doing, where you're not only drumming, but you're playing the piano. I said, that's what we're trying to teach our kids to do, my sons. And I said, you're really good. What else do you do? And Will looked at me and he goes, well, I'm presently tour with Stephen Curtis Chapman. I was like, and so I thought, well, I knew I could spot talent. And Will, my dad, he saw Stephen Stills and David Crosby in a hotel in the East Coast for, it was during the changing of the leaves. And so he was stuck, it snowed in. And so he's sitting in the bar. These two guys are playing and singing in the bar. So they take a break, and it's David Crosby. He comes back to get a drink. And my dad says, hey, you guys are good. I think I could get the money together to promote y'all. And he said, David Crosby looked at him. He goes, well, man, what's your name? He said, Jim. He said, Jim, I appreciate it. He said, but we have a record deal. Yeah. Said, what's your name? And he said, David Crosby. He goes, have you heard of us? My dad had never heard of him. And he said, who? And he said, David Crosby, because that guy's Stephen Still. Dad said, well, I knew you were good. So anyway, but Colton is the person I was talking to you about that night. And you told your story, and you're going to tell more of that here in a minute. But anyway, so that's the background. That he was how old was Colton then? Like maybe 12.
Yeah, I was going to say super young. Had to be super young, yeah.
And so anyway, so Colton is a quintessential drummer, keyboard player, guitar player, and so forth. But I want you to know that you were a big part of that and inspiration. So Colton's going to ask you some questions here, and we're going to move it along. But this should be fun.
That means a lot.
Okay, so these are the Chat GPT questions.
Wow.
All right, so I'm gonna read a sentence. You go yes or no. We'll kind of rapid fire through this thing. Okay. All right, so your bio per artificial intelligence. Will Denton is a highly accomplished professional drummer known for his exceptional talent, versatility, and dynamic stage presence. Yes or no?
Wait, I'm supposed to agree with this?
Yeah,
that's a yes.
Is it accurate? Is it accurate or inaccurate?
I mean, that's borderline narcissism. I don't know. I feel like I am a solid drummer. There are some things I'm really good at. There are some things I'm not so good at. But I feel like I'm competent in a number of settings. Okay. And so that's where I would correct Chat GPT. I like me. Okay. I do. but all I have to do to just realize my place in the musical world these days is get on YouTube for about 5 minutes and hear some of the 10-year-olds 12-year-olds and what they're doing, or just listen to Snarky Puppy for about 3 minutes, and I'm just like, I'm done. I'm really done. So,
I know those guys are on a different planet, aren't they?
Yes, some different plane of musical understanding. Yes.
Aren't they from? Yeah. Are they from UNT? Snarky Puppy.
I think so.
I think that's right. Yeah. Weren't they like 1 o'clock lab guys? Weren't they?
Think so.
I think that's at least the founding member. I think the bass player is the founder, and I know at least he was a 1 o'clock guy. I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm sure people through there. Man, we could have a whole podcast talking about them. All right, I'm gonna jump to the next one. Okay, it says born and raised in a musically inclined family, Denton's passion for drumming emerged at a young age. He honed his craft through years of dedicated practice and formal training, solidifying his technical proficiency and musical sensibilities. Yes or no?
That is true. My biggest musical influence was my grandmother, who played piano in church, and that's where I got my piano playing notions, mostly by osmosis. Just watching her. Yeah, yes, that's true. Yes.
I think it's interesting the number of people that have the grandmother playing piano in church story as like their influence into it, Because I think I've even heard Scott, a mutual friend of ours, Scott Williamson, talk about that. I don't know if you know Jacob Lowry, bass player.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of got the same story where it was like, grew up in church, and that's kind of what propelled it. All right, let's see. Throughout his career, Denton has collaborated with numerous acclaimed artists and bands, leaving an indelible mark on their music. Yes or no?
Wow.
Chat GPT.
I love you guys, Chat GPT. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I was given some really amazing opportunities to be part of not only some, dare I say, fairly iconic live, performances and tours, but I got to play on some recordings that I had no business playing on. So to that effect, or to that end, I guess I did leave some sort of impact. History will judge as to whether or not it was a positive or negative. But I and it's the same thing. I was just saying. I feel like there are some strengths I have that I've really honed and I feel really strong about. There's some that I'm like, I could go back to like Stephen Curtis's Declaration album. I love listening to what the stuff that we did on Live Out Loud. But there's probably a fill on another song on that record that I was like, oh wow, that was so far behind the beat. We were not cutting with Pro Tools or anything like that. What we were cutting with was a producer named Brown Bannister, whom I have the utmost respect for, and who also would, after a take, would get on the talk back and he goes, hey, that kick drum on the and of 3 and bar 7 of verse 2, I think was just a little off. So we're going to do it again.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not saying he was a beast to work with at all, but the man's ears were gigantic, and I had never faced that kind of scrutiny before. So that process, like I can listen to some of Steven's songs that I played on, and I'm like, yeah, that we got that one. And well, I shouldn't say we. Everybody else did fabulous on on those records. I feel like, ooh, that Phil. If I were to record that again, I know what I would do now. But I guess that's the purview of anyone that gets to do a recording and maybe listens to it 20 years later or something like that. So
sure.
So yeah, I have been allowed to make an impact, but whether or not it's an indelible, was that the word, indelible?
Yeah, it said indelible. Yeah.
Wow, more like indefensible. I'm just kidding.
Man, and just so there's no listener left behind, when Brown came to you and said, "Hey, we're going to have to do that again," it wasn't just Will go back in the booth and do it again. Because you said you weren't cutting the Pro Tools, so that was the whole band, or?
Well, I mean, we were using some sort of digital interface to record, so we obviously, if someone had to make a fix, they could, but no, it was. Let me think of maybe an example, like let's go to the Declaration record. Oh, there's a song called "This Day." So that song has a different drum set for the verses than and the chorus has the big drums. And on the verses, we were recording like a little 20-inch kick, a little popcorn snare drum, 10-inch hi-hats, and just to make it a little loopier and everything. Yep. And that was one of I remember that song in particular because I like what I came up with, but I will happily tell you that it was like at the near depths of everyone's patience limits, because I was kind of mentally going through my catalog of, well, I could play this and it didn't work. Oh, how about if I try this? And honestly, I pulled out this linear groove thing that I had worked on in college, and I hadn't played it in years, and I just remember doing it. And when I started playing it, everyone kind of stopped. Was like, okay, that's it, record, and we immediately went to it. I'll tell you another quick story, if I may, because this one has an even bigger impact in my entire life. I should probably start at the beginning, but I'll make this just a little drumming segment, but I do want to tell the whole story if I can beforehand, but at some point. So when I auditioned for DC Talk, the very first time, I'm going to have to tell you the story because it doesn't make sense unless I do, because this is so awesome and such a God thing that I can't even wrap my hand around it sometimes. So I graduated from Belmont University. It was Belmont College when I started there. I transferred in. I was studying orchestral percussion down at Valdosta State College or University in South Georgia, where I'm from. I did the orchestral thing for 3 years, loved it. I was playing timpani and four mallets. I was wearing a tux all the time, but I wanted to be in Christian music. I wanted to be playing drum set, and Belmont had this program, and everyone kind of goes Belmont and goes, sort of gravitates toward it at some point, it seems. Well, I got out of Belmont in May of '92, and I began working full time at a drum shop that I had been working at part-time while I was a student, and it was the greatest drum shop in the whole world. It's called Forks Drum Closet. It's owned by Gary.
Oh, yeah.
His name is, oh yeah, you know it. Of course you do. Well, I was working there full-time. I had been there probably about 6 months when this guy, the bass player I knew from someone somehow around Belmont, he came into Forks one day and he handed me a cassette. Yes, that's how old I am. Handed me a cassette of this new Christian band from Australia. And you may laugh out loud when I tell you their name. I'm not making this up. Their name was the Noisy Little Sunbeams. Take it all in, people. It's not a drill. They were out. My friend Kevin, he said, "Hey, these guys are opening up for the Newsboys on some shows, and you want to come out and play?" Well, of course I did. That's what I wanted to do. I knew nothing about this band. I knew they were getting a little bit of airplay. I'd hear them from time to time on like the Christian radio station in Nashville. Well, let me just tell you, talking about paying some dues, my first, one of my earliest gigs with them involved me getting into the back of a cargo van, the very back, not having a seat to sit on. I had to lie down on a road case in the back with a quilt on top of it for some cushioning. And I rode from Nashville, Tennessee to Rochester, New York, in that very prone position. I got off that van, packed up, set up my drums and went in and played, this show opening for the Newsboys. And guess what, people? We got right back in the van and I rode back to Nashville. It's funny, no one ever offered to get back on to trade spaces with me. But anyway, the point is those were very difficult gigs. A lot of them were like that. We've all had our road horror stories and we've all paid our dues. So I'm nothing special in that respect, but my back hurt for a week. I'll tell you that much. So, sure. But that allowed Peter Furler, the drummer from the Newsboys, at the time, to hear me play. And get this, I came back after a torturous weekend somewhere not long after that. And I just told him, I said, guys, I want to play, but this is not for me. It's not. And that was a Sunday night. We'd gotten back into town. The very next morning, I went back to work at Forks, and I had been in the door 30 seconds when one of my coworkers handed me this business card. And he said, "Hey, my wife got this card from this guy last night, and I know you're into Christian music. I just wanted to give it to you." He didn't know who they were. And I looked at the card, and it was some guy from Michigan, and written in pencil on the back, it said, looking for Christian drummer to play rap, hip hop music with DC Talk. And I'm jumping forward real quick. I have a scrapbook of tour memories. That's page one. That card is page one for me. It's just by itself, in the middle of the page. But get this, I called immediately. I kind of blew off work that morning. I got in trouble, but I was like, well, I got to track this down. Yeah. And the backstory of how that card got into my hand is, I just think this is such a God thing. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. My coworker's wife was a waitress at a Holiday Inn, at the restaurant at the Holiday Inn in Brentwood. I'm not even sure if the Holiday Inn is still there, but whatever. She was waiting. Waiting tables that night, and she waited on a guy who was very busy. He had all his paperwork on his desk on the table, and he was, working, and she was trying to make a little bit of small talk. And she said, well, so what brings you to town? And he said, well, I'm the tour manager for this band called DC Talk. We're holding auditions this week. We're putting together our first live band, and I'm trying to get the audition time set for these people. And she goes, oh, well, my husband works at a drum shop. He probably knows a drummer. And the guy looked up, and he was like, well, we kind of already have all the guys we want to listen to, but okay. And he gave her the card. And I've been thinking, I think about it today. Like, if that man's name was Denny Keatsman, I grew to know and love that man very much. He became like a second dad to me on the road. And I just thought, if Denny had gone out for barbecue that night, or had even been seated at a different table, we wouldn't likely be having this conversation at all. Maybe we would for some other reason. Maybe, I don't know. But my path started that night at that just hotel restaurant. So I called frantically. I got a hold of Denny. He had just flown back into Michigan. He probably just landed and walked in the door, and I mispronounced his name. I did everything wrong. I spoke too quickly, and he kind of was like, I could tell he was probably just holding the phone like away from his ear for a few seconds. And he finally got back, and he said, well, I tell you what, I already have all the guys I want to hear, but if you want to come in first thing on whatever Thursday morning, I'll put you on the list, okay? And he said, here's the address for the management company. Go get a CD, learn these songs, and we'll see you there. So, Colton, you'll love this. I showed up, and basically my audition was just playing along with the CD. There were no other musicians there. And I don't think Mike or Kevin were even there. Toby was in there. It was too early. He was drinking coffee. He was kind of listening, but sort of not. And I pretty much figured myself to be the sound check guy. I was just getting the sounds for the rest of the guys that day. So as odd as it seemed to me at the time, I left there going, man, okay, so I got an audition under my belt. Man, this is my first audition. I thought there'd be other players there, but who cares? I got to do one, and I played along with the CD on top of the drums. And
you mean the drum tracks were still in there?
Oh, I was playing along to the CD, the actual CD. Yeah.
I thought you meant it was like a track, like no drums. They just didn't bring any players in.
It was like, go down to the Christian bookstore, buy a copy, and just, hey, this is how I play it. So nice. There is a point to all of this. I mean, this story is really, it still moves me emotionally a lot to tell it. But so I left there thinking, okay, notch in the belt. I know a little better what to expect. I'll be better prepared for my next audition. So I left, and a couple of days later, I was attending. We had this marvelous thing at Charlie Peacock's home/church/studio at the time. It was a weekly gathering called the Art House, where people got together that were involved in Christian music, or the arts, like visual, dance, sculpting, whatever. Just all these people just got together and talked about what it meant to like live a life of passion for God while pursuing what you were doing, and it was such a uplifting experience. I had the greatest times going to those meetings. Well, I went to the meeting a couple of days later, and like a couple of friends of mine said, "Hey, we heard you had a really good audition." I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, I had gotten no feedback, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I still can't believe this. I got a phone call the next day for a callback, an actual callback from that scenario. And I was like, well, man, I started thinking, okay, I really wasn't thinking anything beyond, that first audition, whatever. And so I really tried to go, well, I'm going to do this quite seriously. I'm going to try to look the part, I went out and bought all these baggy hip hop clothes. I tried to, it's so funny. I really showed up probably not recognizable from the first audition because I was, I really was trying to fit in. But I was going to tell you this time at my audition, I was the last guy. I was the last guy to play. And there were phenomenal players there. I was so excited. I got to play with Roscoe Meek, who was from Jeff Moore in the Distance. He was there. Jackie Street, Lord love him, was playing bass because he had been playing some with DC Talk. They didn't have a whole band. Curiously enough, they'd play along the tracks, but Jackie would go out on some shows and play bass, which was a show in itself.
Yeah,
he was one of the greats, absolutely one of the greatest bass players that ever set foot in Nashville. So Jackie Street's there, Roscoe Meek's playing. We actually played probably 4 or 5 songs, and the coolest part of it was that the songs were finished per se, like the tracks were done, whatever. We were playing along with tracks at that point, but we just kept playing, and we started taking things into weird time signatures. Probably got a little too fusiony, but it was just fun. We were having this real interaction.
Yeah.
The reason I started telling you this story, though, just from a drumming just little thing, is after it was all done, they said, "Hey, why don't you play something like play a solo for us?" And I hate playing solos. I hated it then. I hate it even more now. But you know what I did? I was a huge fan of Will Kennedy, Yellow Jackets. And one of my favorite albums of theirs was called Politics, and there was this song on there called The Tortoise and the Hare. And Will's playing on that track still. I tear up when I hear his cymbal work and the way he played this really musical but completely unexpected groove with what these guys were doing. And I actually got to do an interview with Will, and I basically said, I think you're the reason I have a career right now because they liked my playing, but when I caught this thing that you did on Tortoise and the Hare, they were like, "Whoa, this guy," and all I was doing was butchering his finesse and nuance. But I pulled something out of my hat that I had studied for a long time, and it was kind of in reserve. And okay, I guess I'll finish the story. So I left that night feeling pretty good, but man, let me just tell you, as you well know, Colton, when management tells you, "Hey, we'll call you tomorrow and let you know who got it," that means you're going to sit around like twiddling your thumbs for 3 weeks and not hear a word out of us. And you'll probably just, want to quit music altogether from not hearing anything, and you'll have anxiety attacks and so forth. So guess what? A week passes, and oh man, I'm so old. I had an answering machine at home. I was calling in every 20 minutes to listen to see if there was a new message. Okay. And I remember I was at Corky's Barbecue in Brentwood, Tennessee. I was meeting some friends there. I was the first one to arrive, and there was a payphone in the lobby. And I said, okay, this was like 7:00 at night on a Friday or something, maybe later. And I called home one more time, and there was just this quick message that said, "Hey, Will, this is Chad over at Chapel Hill. Hey, you got the tour. Call me on Monday and we'll discuss." And so that was it. And I thought I'd heard it wrong, and I called back and listened to it one more time. And then what I could only describe as a complete emotional meltdown, release, exuberance, just spilling out of me, I proceeded to kind of shout and scream in Porky's, and I think I hugged almost every patron there that night. I went around tables and told them I'd gotten the gig, and a lot of people thought I said ZZ Top, and they were very happy for me. I remember one guy going, "Oh man, I thought you were going to play with ZZ Top," and I'm like, anyway. So, wow, that was a long story, but that's where everything kind of started for me in terms of just that path. And man, I'm a kid from a farming town in South Georgia. I had, I had no business. I just couldn't believe it. But I learned in that moment very, very clearly, and still feel this way, that, if God has you, if this is your path that he has you on, it doesn't really matter how many other world-class drummers are out there, or who else, everyone else knows. And, it just doesn't matter. I mean, be the best musician you can be. I'm not saying you don't have to worry about anything, but I mean, at the same time, man, that gave me great peace. And when I really realized that, I didn't have a demo reel. I decided I wasn't going to get like a business card. I just wasn't going to go that route. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I think I just felt like wherever I was supposed to be, God was going to put me. If I just did my part, it was kind of an exciting thing to see what would open up next. Yeah, that is kind of where it all started. So that was a long one.
Wow.
Thanks for letting me share it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's fantastic. And I tell you, the night that I talked to you in Paris, you told me a short portion of that, but what's cool, Will, is that really encouraged me, because fast forward, my other son, who he has a music business degree, Colton has a music business degree, but in high school, my other son, talking to the guidance counselor, he said, so what do you want to do with your life? And he said, well, I'd like to be a pro drummer. And this guy actually played in a cover band, but evidently had not gone as far as he had wanted to. And I mean, he just basically took a psychological, machine gun and just gunned down my son and told him, well, you need to change your thinking. That's never going to happen. And so he came home and told us this. And, he was on the verge of quitting band. We were hitting, he was in drum instruction. And so, but I remembered, your story, and the fact that, as you said, if God has that for you, then that's, it's going to happen. And so that encouraging story that you share, for the people that are listening, and maybe perhaps they're not in the musical realm or in the arts, but the fact of the matter is your testimony that you've always given God, if you want to say the shout out to, is the fact that he directed your path, and he opened the doors, and he made these things happen, and you've been obedient. And so that's a great word of encouragement to all of us, which, part of the show is the fundamental is to encourage and inspire. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback real quick. I really relate a lot to your story. And I think the benefit of being a believer, and you kind of even touched on it, is like it takes the pressure off a little bit, because like you said, you have to be the best you can possibly be. But at the end of the day, the pressure's off because it's not in my hands, and really I think that extrapolates over to any field.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I appreciated you saying that.
Well, I mean, the curious thing is, I remember before I was, I became a Christian when I was 17, and I immediately just started going to all these concerts and seeing all these bands play. And I do remember thinking, like, watching those guys, as silly as it sounds, I remember thinking, man, I bet food tastes better to them, or colors are more vibrant. They're just cut from a different cloth. They're just, and I don't know if I could ever be one of those guys or, fit those molds. And I think that's, it's unhealthy thinking in a lot of ways. Certainly the the pedestal you put people on will always come back to slap you in the face. And at the same time, just realizing that we are all just people. We are all just humans, fallen, saved by grace, just trying to figure things out. And as consistently as we can, trying to rely not on our own strength to navigate things. But man, I mean, it's easy. I will say, living in Nashville for me, I feel like I was, I feel like I was kind of there in the salad days of Christian music, if you will. I thought Michael W. Smith was the greatest thing, and I went to Belmont, and next thing I know, Michael's coming to the VSU to talk about his Change the World album that he's working on, and he was just the most accessible, most polite guy, non-star persona person. And I would see him at church at Christ Community, and he was just there, sometimes jubilant, sometimes very somber. That was good for me to see, and I think it would be good for anybody to see. I don't really think that most people think truly that, so-and-so, whoever they see on stage, is like from another planet or, is different fundamentally. But, you do respect the people that have put in such hard work and they've achieved a lot. You think, well, they are a cut above. But man, I just think that's where this whole common denominator thing comes into play. I am somewhere as a drummer. I am somewhere in the pecking order of a super long chain of people, and I'm nowhere near the top. But I had a place. God allowed me to do those things, and like I said, there's some things I feel like I did really well, and I was real proud of, and I still just shake my head, that I got to do them. But right now, I feel like, man, I'm so not like at a level where I could be as far as my playing. When I compare myself to some of the guys I see on YouTube, and it's just mind-boggling the talent, the facility that I see in the hands of some young drummers. But I'll just tell you this: you take this to the bank. I don't care who they are on YouTube and how fast they can play. Nobody still to this day has faster hands than Buddy Rich. So, boom.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So, yeah.
Is that going to be the title of this episode now? Nobody has faster hands than Buddy Rich?
I'd be okay with that. I would. Yeah.
Either that or the beef tallow is liquid gold. That was a great quote, too.
That's a good one, too. Oh, man, we got some gems here. Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to wind up. Yeah.
As a kid, I watched Johnny Carson. He was a huge Buddy Rich fan. Yes. So I'm just a little kid. I don't know anything. And Buddy, he played, if I can remember, I think he played traditional style to where the sticks, his hold, he didn't hold it this way. And, he was kind of by then he was an older guy, and, they'd have his drum set out there on in the center stage, and he played with the Doc Severinsen band. But I'm like, why is Johnny doing this? Why has he got Buddy Rich on there, And then, of course, as I get older and I love music, then you realize, oh, okay, I didn't understand. I was just a kid,
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate that comment. And while I'm thinking about that, the guy that sings lead for your cover band is fantastic. He sounds like Tom Petty. I'm a huge Tom Petty fan. So we're listening to Tom Petty, right? And my wife wasn't brought up in music, and she makes a comment about Tom Petty. Like, anybody can sing like that. And I said, no, you don't disrespect Tom Petty. She goes, but listen to him. I said, No, he's like right on the note, but he's as far off the note and yet on it.
Yeah.
And he's that good, and he can do it all day long. She goes, well, I don't get it. Same thing about Johnny Cash, but I sat there and I thought, a lot of ministers have used the song Refugee, so anyway, that kind of ties in with what we're talking about. But when you talk about cover bands, and not trying to be somber, but I think about Taylor Hawkins, and, you had the Chevy Metal, Chevy Metal.
Mm.
And I thought, here he is playing with one of the biggest rock bands that's ever been.
Yep.
But yet he loved doing covers. So he had his band. And so I think it's cool that you do that. But Colton, you got some more questions, and then we're going to kind of keep moving. But I tell you, Will, that's an inspirational story. I think it's fundamental and it's powerful. And thank you for sharing. I want to hear more also when we do a few more questions from Colton. But some people may not know who you are. You're a drummer. You're a pretty, quiet guy in the sense of, you don't do a lot of social media. Everyone knows who you are, and all the people that want you to play know how to contact you. So you aren't putting out, advertisements in the trade magazine. But at some point, I do want you to give us kind of a rundown after Colton does a couple more questions, because you played with a plethora of people. You played in a plethora of venues. And we like to hear about that as fans. But then also it's just interesting because, things aren't always what they appear. The Dallas Amphitheater, we saw Matchbox 20 and Goo Goo Dolls, and we were right at the edge of the ceiling and had fantastic seats. And, I actually met Rob Thomas when he was there at Next Stage years before with their tour. But anyway, but we were cool, it was kind of warm that night, but we were comfortable. When I went down front, because they weren't stopping you, it was just sweltering heat. And Colton, a friend of his, was actually the stage manager for the show. So we met him afterwards, and I said, well, do they have air conditioning? He goes, no, man. It's like, you got to be kidding me. The lead guitar player, he stripped his shirt, all they were soaking wet. So I want to hear some of that here in a minute. But Colton, any other questions that you see? And we can trim it down, but
yeah, I was going to say, I think we've covered a lot of this stuff. One of the things that was in here was talking about, obviously we've touched on the live and studio, and more personally, I'm just curious, were you ever more proud of, hey, I think that record is my favorite thing I've ever done, or that show or that tour is my favorite thing I've ever done? Is there anything that sticks out where you're like, that was the most fun I ever had kind of thing?
Ooh. Oh man. Okay. That is a big question. Okay. Let me try to tackle that. The Jesus Freak tour was one of the most intense, chaotic, over the top, fun, challenging tours I've ever been a part of. Toby early on started calling me Chill Will, and it's still a moniker I kind of use. I love Toby, I really do, and I think it was mostly because I was from South Georgia and I was playing in a hip hop band, and I did not exactly speak the language. So I think pretty much for the first year or so on the road, I was just scared to open my mouth and embarrass myself. So that's how I became Chill Will, But I will tell you that first of all, they wanted a certain look for the band on that tour, and the look that was deemed for me, okay, get ready, was hockey jerseys, long sleeved, and or mostly, the 3/4 length hockey jerseys and corduroy pants. Now, if you can come up with a hotter combination of a first layer of clothing, let me know about it, because I can't. And not to mention, my hair was down halfway my back, and I was constantly slinging my head around. That was the hottest I've ever been in my entire life. And I've been to the Middle East.
Yeah.
That tour, just as a side note, just a fun fact, I've never been hotter in my entire life. I've also never had just more chaos and fun, and somehow or another, through all the noise and bombast and people jumping off stage and running into each other and cymbals knocked over and all this, I just, God just completely moved every night of that tour. And to me, that was what was so amazing, is that almost in spite of the knuckleheads we were being on stage, in a way, God, I just saw lives impacted in a very real way, including my own, because I was telling your dad on the phone the other day, the DC Talk tour, from day one that I was a part of it, they always had Michael Guido out with them, their road pastor. And you know how it is. Any person you bring on the road, there's a lot of considerations. It's another salary. It's another place on the bus. It's all the things you have to think about. And they never once balked at that. They never said, maybe we won't do it this tour. And the nice thing about that is Guido, as we lovingly called him, he came to us every day individually. And, we might have been having a terrible day, or we might have been thinking, we might have read a great concert review from the night before and just thought we were the stuff or whatever. But he would be like, hey, where are you with God right now? What's God doing in your life? And I'd be like, oh, yeah. Oh, man. And that was one of the things I would say to their credit. One of the many things I say to their credit is it was not just a rock and roll show. It was a deeply spiritual experience, a deeply discipleship-oriented experience. And I just had a blast. I probably also lost 10 pounds on that tour just from sweating. But I loved the camaraderie that I had with that band. I still stay in touch with a lot of them, and I that was, from a live standpoint, that was one of my favorite things. From a studio, but I also got to tell you, when I went from DC Talk to Stephen Curtis Chapman, it was in many ways a different audience, a different musical approach. I think one of the reasons Stephen hired me is because his two boys, they were young at the time and they loved DC Talk, and I was slinging my head around and they probably said, Dad, you got to get him. You got to get him.
Yeah.
But, I couldn't, that was not my stylistic approach with Stephen. It was very different. So it was sort of a recalibration for me in terms of my playing, and also just how I felt like the audience was responding, because a lot of times they would sit down for a lot of the show, and I was like, why are these people sitting down? We're terrible or something. But I will tell you that oh man, I can't even really talk about this without crying. But the Declaration tour, the Live Out Loud album, Live Out Loud was the album, and it was kind of like no, it was called Declaration. I'm so sorry. I'm getting some things confused. But that tour where we were able to take out Steve Saint, who was the grandson of one of the missionaries killed in Ecuador back in the 50s. Back in the 50s, the death of a missionary, and certainly the death of multiple missionaries, was national news. It made Life magazine, and it was tied into the story of Jim Elliot, whom I had read all of his books in college. I was completely blown away that I got to be a part of that, the telling of that story at any level. And to hear Steve Saint talk about, his dad being killed, and actually having one of the killers out on stage with him, one of the men that murdered the 5 missionaries from the tribe, who's now, who was himself a believer. The whole tribe had been converted to Christianity, and he even considered him kind of like his grandfather. That was that was the apex, the pinnacle experience in terms of just the meaningfulness for me. There were so many behind the scenes stories and things that happened on that tour that I just can't even quantify how important they were to me. So those were two very stylistically different things that I enjoyed for for different reasons in a lot of ways. As far as recordings, I'm proud of all the stuff I got to do with Steven. I'm grateful, more grateful than proud. But I did play on a couple of recordings from a songwriter lady named Lori McKenna. Lori is a fantastically talented. I mean, that doesn't even do it close to do it justice. She is a superlative songwriter and artist herself. And when you see her list of songs that she has written for other people, I mean, I'm just talking like number one after number one after number one, and she could just rip your heart out with a song and stomp that sucker flat. She really can. I got to play on 2 of her EPs, but if I had to hang my hat on drumming wise on something on one project, it would be this album of hers called Lorraine. Most of the reason I'm telling you that is because the songs just played themselves. They really did. They were so immensely well written that I just was kind of hanging on for dear life. But yeah, that would be one of my all-time favorite recordings that I got to do. I'll tell you a really funny story. There's a producer named Bill Baumgart. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but for a while there, it seemed like we were crossing paths quite a bit, and I was playing on some of the stuff that he would work on. I really respected him tremendously. Well, one day he called me and he said, "Hey, Will, I've got this drummer from LA, and we kind of got in the weeds a little bit, and we were going to try to get some more tracks done, but he's got to catch a flight. So I still need 2 songs cut. He's wrapping up on I've got one more song I can cut with him. And I just wondered if you would consider coming out and just playing the other 2 songs." I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course, Bill. Who's the drummer?" And he says, "It's Vinny Colaiuta." And I'm like, I just remembered I'm having both my legs amputated.
Real.
Sorry, would love to, but I just remembered. So
now be sure give our audience a background in case they don't know who Vinny is. We know who he is, but
okay, Vinny Colaiuta is, to my mind, still to this day, the greatest living drummer on the planet. His resume includes, Joni Mitchell. He Sting. Herbie Hancock. I'll put you this way. Vinny Colaiuta, 1 week. I'm good friends with all the Drum Paradise guys. It's this drum cartage company, and I used to do my cartage through them. And one time, one of the guys there told me, "Man, I did 3 cartages for Vinny Colaiuta this week. He played on." And I hope I'm getting this right. I know one was a Bill Evans record, okay, super swinging jazz. The next record was like a Trisha Yearwood thing, and I'm not making this up. The other record was a Megadeth record, okay.
Wow,
and that's how versatile he is. And the man, I've always thought, okay, if you give me a drummer and let me watch a recording of him playing, if you give me enough time, I feel like I can transcribe what he did. It might take me a while, but I can write it down. I'll get it on paper if you give me enough time. There are some things that Vinny does, like just that go over my head from an entirely conceptual standpoint. I can't really even conceive of what he's doing, and it doesn't seem humanly possible that he did that. And at the same time, it is so musical. If you want to hear one of the best examples of crazy interesting drumming in what I would call more of a pop setting, Sting's 10 Summoner's Tales is one of the most interesting drumming performances I've ever heard. Okay. And so that's who I'm filling in for on this session. And I really almost told Bill, I'm like, nope, I can't do it. But I did. I drove down there, And I actually got to hear Vinny. Well, I got to watch him cut that last song of his. I still have the picture of me and him, framed and all that. But I will tell you, my tracks did not sound like his. I got something down. I'm pretty sure it made the record, but I can say that I shared drumming duties on a record with Vinny Colaiuta only in the most rudimentary sense, like maybe scraping the bottom of the barrel. I was the last guy that was available. Called, that guy. I don't even know what to say. He did a large portion of the song I was watching with one hand, and it was not because he was being cavalier or nonchalant. He wanted it to sound like that. It had this thing where he was grooving with this one hand hi-hat snare thing. And I was like, I couldn't do that with three arms. I really couldn't. So anyway, that was a recording highlight. And with this, I'll there's probably more I can share, but I'll tell you my favorite road story of all time. Okay. This won't take too long. This was back in the DC Talk days. I'm so proud of this. So we had a show in New York City, and we had a day off prior to that show. So Jason Halbert, the keyboard player at the time with DC Talk, who is superb, and he's now Kelly Clarkson's musical director on her show. Yep. And he's been with her for years. So Jason and I decided we'd go walk around town and just see the sights. And there was talk of the possibility of getting some tickets to the David Letterman taping that night. Because, they're free. You just got to get them in time or whatever, or at least they were. So Jason and I, so the DC Talk guys were kind of talking about getting tickets for them, just three, okay, which is fine, okay. They were going to try to get tickets for them. So Jason and I decided that we would walk over to the Sullivan Theater, and Jason was such a tourist. He had a camcorder, and he was like just chronicling everything. And we went to this deli prior to this, and he was telling me on camera, he was like, "We are going to be on David Letterman tonight." I'm like, Jason, no, we're not. Shut up. There's no way. And like, right. He said, "No, man, I just feel it. We're going to be on TV tonight." So, we walked over to the theater, and this was probably about 4 o'clock. They start taping about 5. I'm talking like this is still happening in real time. It doesn't happen anymore, but golly, David Letterman, so at 4 o'clock, by the way, I should probably tell you, it's February in New York, and it is sleeting, and we are the only morons stupid enough to be standing outside in the elements, shaking, freezing. And all we wanted to do was just kind of catch a glimpse of somebody going in the side door. There were limos parked up and down the street. And of course, this is a time, this has been a while, but Bill Cosby was the main guest, at that night. We were kind of like, man, I wonder if we could see Cosby, just catch a glimpse.
Sure.
So 4 o'clock, we're sitting there and shaking, and the door opens, and it was Biff, who was the stage director at the time, the guy with the headphones, and he stuck his head out, and he was kind of looking around, and we're kind of poking each other like, that's him, that's Biff, and we're getting this all on camera. And he kind of looks around, and then he closes the door. And honestly, I was happy at that point. I felt like we had seen a celebrity, a real star, and we're like, we can leave now, because I was cold. Jason, we stood out there. we stood out there longer. Nobody else walked in and out. But at about 4:30, I'm not making this up, a guy walks up in a hot dog suit. I'm talking red tights, yellow shoes. He's got a bun. He's wrapped in this bun. And he walks up, and he's just kind of looking at us, and we're looking at him like, what are you doing here? And we started talking to him, and we found out he was from this meat processing plant in Canada, okay? He was trying to get, all the street cams they did. He was just trying to get a little FaceTime for the logo and for the company on TV. Well, Biff comes out again and looks at the guy and motions him over. And we're like, oh, he's going to be on TV. And he goes, and we heard him talking to the guy. He's now, did Dave invite you on the show? And he's like, no, I just, I work for so-and-so. I was just really trying to get some exposure for our brand and everything. And he goes, oh, okay. By this time, the band's warming up. It's almost showtime. He goes, oh, man, well, I'm really sorry. I can't help you. Then he looks at Jason and I, and he goes, now, are you the guys here to deliver the pizza to David Letterman on the show? And we kind of look at each other, and we're like, yes, we are. Yes, we are. We are they. Yes. And he goes, okay, well, listen, just come in. We'll get you set up and all this stuff. And we go inside the theater, and we're waiting in the wings, and then we're hearing the band. And it all worked out, but poor Jason, I had a crisis of conscience. I was like, Jason, we got to come clean. I don't even know what this guy's talking about. And he's like, no. But he finally agreed, and so we told Biff, and this is like 2 minutes before the show is starting, and we were like, told him, look, we don't know what you're talking about, but we'll do pretty much anything to be on the show. And he gets so mad, he's like, I don't have time for this, and he threw us out on the street. And at that point, Jason was probably ready to never speak to me again. But I said, Jason, we got to go get a pizza right now. So we tear off around the corner and find the first pizzeria, which took about 3 seconds. We go in, we ordered the pizza. We had whatever was ready, we took. And we came back. And by that time, the show is underway. But get this, I guess since the guys who were supposed to deliver the pizza, whatever that gimmick was supposed to be, never showed up, Letterman does this cattle call on his megaphone. He says, citizens of New York, this is David Letterman. Bring me a pizza now. And guess who's first in line? Because we went and got pizza, and we show up people start lining up with pizzas, but Jason and I are first in line. And he looks at us for a second like, I shouldn't let y'all in, but I'm going to. And so 5 minutes later, Bill Cosby's sitting out there talking to Letterman, and we get this cue, and we walk on stage and pass out pizza to the band, audience members. Letterman gave Jason like $100 tip. I can't remember what he gave. He gave me some money too. And I was wearing my DC Talk humongous tour jacket at the time. And I made sure to just kind of walk right in front of the camera as we were leaving and everything. I was right there. So this is a long story, but here's the best part. Toby, Mike, and Kevin were unsuccessful in getting tickets for the show. So we went back to the bus that night, and we were like, hey, did you guys get tickets for the show? Like, oh, no, man. It was sold out or whatever. So, oh, well, hey, we heard, Cosby's on. We should watch it. Let's watch it. Anyway, let's just watch the show. And, man, 10 minutes later, when Jason and I walk on camera and hand David Letterman a pizza, their jaws – I wish you could have. It was one of the greatest moments of my touring career, and it was such a big deal that made like the Tennessean the next day, the Society column or whatever. We had all this publicity.
Wow.
The record label Forefront was trying to milk it for all it was worth. Just like, hey, DC Talk seen whatever fan members at the David Letterman show. But that's one of my favorites. The sad thing is, I have about 10 more of those. I probably should write a book, as every touring musician could and should tell their stories, because that's just one of the coolest things about being on the road, is the unexpecteds and the I can't believe we're here sort of things.
Sure.
So, wow, that was another long story. Sorry.
Well, I tell you what, though, Will, I would encourage you to think seriously about doing your own podcast, your own YouTube channel show.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Well, because, man, you just have this vast history. It's encouraging. It's fascinating. It's insightful, because so many people, we pay and we go to concerts, but we don't know what's going on. And to think, did you turn around and then do a concert that night? Did you guys perform?
It was the next day. It was the next day. Yeah, that all happened on our day off, prior. So, in conjunction with that, and part of some stuff I read about you, where you've also been band director and stuff, and knowing the way Colton does things on a smaller scale, to where a lot of the times when he's in concert, that he's triggering kind of the set from his laptop.
How is it on like the big mega shows where you're at that huge, arena or football stadium? Who is actually triggering? I would assume most people use tracks now or click tracks or something. Is it still the drummer, or are you having to rely on somebody else that starts the set or the song? How does that work in today's world?
Well, I think I think majority of the really, really big tours have a dedicated track person off the side of the stage. And I know of a company in Nashville that routinely, that's what they do, is they train and send out Ableton Live operators on these big tours. And that's what they do, is they manage all the backing tracks or click tracks, and they fire them from the side of the stage. When I was touring on some of the bigger ones, I don't know how the drummer became the de facto track guy, but we did, and we were. The only thing that really changed for me is, when I got to some of the bigger tours, there was a lot of redundancy built in. Like, there were matching computer setups with the same tracks, the same shows, the interfaces were the same. And if one computer did go down, it was very easy just to unplug, and get another computer. They were all firing simultaneously. If one lost audio, they could switch over very quickly. But I don't want to give the impression that that just mega tracks were utilized. With Steven, I want to give a huge shout out to his band. We didn't use any tracks. I had a click, but like the Speechless tour, there were no backing tracks. I hope I'm telling you that right. Everything that was played and sung was live. I remember that was in the tour program, and I think on the subsequent tours, we might have thrown a drum loop in here and there, but those guys were such amazing vocalists. It's hard to believe now, as good as they sounded, because everyone thought it was tracks. It was not. Brent Barkus, Randy Pierce, Adam Anders on Speechless, Hardy Hempel, those guys. If you really want to hear something magical, Steven did a session at Abbey Road. I can't believe I got to go to Abbey Road Studios, but he did like a 5 or 6 song EP at Abbey Road Studios. We were all freaking out. I just was kissing the floor, and I got to play that upright Steinway Obla Diabla Da. It's still there. I mean, but if you want to hear something truly magical, that record was completely click free, and it was all done in one take, every song, all the singing and we were just in a circle. Most of the time there was 1 or 2 setups where we were a little more spread out in the room, but and I say that all I was doing was playing drums. Those guys were playing impossibly intricate, guitar, bass, keyboard parts, and singing like studio mavens that they were on top of it. And it's all live. I don't care if the tempo fluctuates or what. It was very real. It all happened, and I say that to their credit. And I mean, it's not like they're the only ones. Most of the tours I've done, the players have been, holy smokes! And the way they can sing and play kind of makes my head hurt. Just the way I was telling you, like Ty Smith is such a great drummer and singer. But yes, technology-wise, I have been using Ableton Live since version 2, baby. I'm a big believer. I really am, and yeah, I don't know how it sort of, like, the drummer became the default track guy, but that was most of my touring experience. I was the one firing the tracks, and that was a lot of pressure too. I know it sounds crazy. All you got to do is hit a space bar. Problem is, you've got to listen to the artist who doesn't say the same thing every night, and try to figure out their mood and what they're feeling, and know when to fire it. And nothing is worse than starting a track at the wrong time. If they're not done talking, ooh boy, it's not a good thing. So, yeah.
Now, do you know? Have you met Greg Bissonette? Have you ever met Greg Bissonette?
We're not friends. I saw him do a clinic when I was working at Fort's Drum Closet. He came out and did a clinic, and was just the most affable, energetic human being I'd met. So I can't say I know him really well, but I have met him. Yes.
I mean, Colton's drum instructor and Joseph's drum instructor, a woman named Lauren Vogel Weiss. Her maiden name is Vogel, but Lauren is a booking agent for pro drummers because her father had the drum store that sold to all the UNT 1 o'clock students, and Greg was one of them. So, we had a chance to meet Greg. He came in for a clinic, and Colton, I guess, were you a senior in high school when you escorted Greg? Yeah. For the day, and it was cool, because Greg's just a sweet guy. But I had a chance to ask him. I thought that was interesting because he toured with James Taylor for a time, and I said, what is that like? Because he's another one of those that's way behind, right on the beat. Yeah. And I thought it was fascinating because he said that as James was talking, that in between, songs, he would have the next song queued up. But I don't think James uses click track, but he had a quartz metronome. It was just black and, it flashed on the floor. And Greg said that he would sit there and watch it for the tempo. And I said, well, how is he to play with? And he says, oh, he's a very gracious man. He says, but he knows, he's just this time. And he said, and so with James, he said, you are on the beat. I mean, you've got to be on the time. So the pressure that you guys are under. But Colton, do you have some other questions? We're going to keep moving, but you're just so gracious to share these stories, man. But anything springing up in your head, Colton, before we move on down the road?
Well, I don't remember the name of the tour with Steven where the setup was he didn't want there to be any downtime during the scene changes. So you guys would come out and play these little acoustic sets while, the first opener would be clearing their gear off. Then you guys would be off doing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just remember that was like a foundational time because you guys weren't playing the same set. It like got bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
I seem to remember. And funny enough, that little acoustic set kind of became the impetus to go to Abbey Road and do that EP because we were just sitting there basically in a little bit of a semicircle, on stage playing.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if that was like the springboard.
It was. It actually was, and it was so much fun. And let me just tell you, I still have. I was playing Pearl drums on that tour, but for the acoustic set. When I was working at Forks, man, I bought this 1950s Ludwig, like little 12 by 20 kick drum. It still had newspaper stuffed in it from like the 1950s. I paid nothing for it. And I quickly figured out how great it mic'd up. And it was one of my favorite drums I played on tour. But I used that drum and a little Ludwig Acro Vistalite, blue Vistalite snare drum and a hi-hat stand and a crash. And I had more fun playing that little acoustic set because it was so much fun. We were kind of just listening to each other, and the arrangements that wound up on that Abbey Road EP were born of our interplay on the stage. We just kind of got used to doing things a certain way, and I kind of knew what was going to happen, after a while. And yes, it did expand, and it was immensely fun to do that. I just because there was no pressure. I mean, there was pressure, but I wasn't firing any clicks. I didn't have to, it was just like Steven would be like, well, let's play this one. And, we go into it. And then, I loved, that's so cool that you mentioned that. That was one of my favorite, parts or segments of musically any tour I did. I love it.
Now tell him you actually met him after the show, didn't you? You and David Parker?
I don't remember
David
that.
Parker.
You know David?
Oh, okay.
He met you because David took Colton, and I can't believe you don't remember this, Colton, because he said, that he knew you and that he was hoping that y'all can meet Colton and David could meet you after the show. And you actually came down after the show down on the floor on the side of the stage. And so Colton, you don't remember that, Colton?
No, I think maybe they went in to talk to you or something. because the only thing I remember about the end of that night was they like left me and I was outside the venue by myself and I couldn't get back in. And
okay.
I don't think I was a part of that because it was like
Yikes.
downtown Dallas. I was a young kid and it was like, what am I doing here? You know?
Okay, I'm so sorry to do this, but I'm going to. So David Parker, in addition to being a wonderful human being and a great producer, I am eternally indebted to that man because he introduced me to the greatest sandwich any human has ever eaten or ever will eat in the entire history of mankind. And that sandwich, my friend, is called the Soprano, and it exists only at the NYPD Deli in Euless, Texas, on Industrial Boulevard. I still have their number in my my phone.
My goodness.
I don't want to overdo this. I don't want to overstate it because it's a sandwich. But let me tell you something, my friend. That sandwich, I guess it's just a couple of real Brooklyn transplants that wound up in Euless, Texas, and opened the deli. Sandwich is called a Soprano. It's an Italian sub. It's their bread, and whatever their Italian dressing is what does it. This is going to get real weird real fast, but I will tell you that I started doing sessions with David at his place in Grapevine, Texas, and the guitar player and I, one of my dearest friends, Stephen Lawicki, we actually would bring our own gear. We didn't want to fly in. Sometimes we flew in, but most of the time we would drive our gear in a van. I'm not exaggerating to say that we would plan our departure time to give us enough time to get from Nashville, Tennessee to Euless, Texas before NYPD Deli closed. There have been numerous days where I've eaten a Soprano for lunch and supper and maybe snacked on another one. When I've had a layover at DFW, I have taken a taxi over to Euless because it's right by DFW.
Yeah.
And I've gotten, we brought back a cooler of Sopranos one time. Whew, sorry.
So we are talking about the same David Parker because at first I was going, David?
David Parker, Chris Clayton, all those guys.
Yeah.
Yes. And oh man, almost every artist I've played with since meeting them and that sandwich, when we are in Dallas, Texas, I have insisted we take a taxi, get a runner, whatever, and go to Industrial Boulevard in Euless, Texas. Now,
amazing.
When Paul McCartney passes away, and when the NYPD Deli closes its doors for good, I will go into mourning for both of those occasions for possibly years. Again, it's a sandwich. I get it, but you just got to trust me on this. Oh my gosh.
Now it's interesting. You mentioned Chris Clayton. The cool thing is it's sort of like maybe we could do another program called 7 Degrees of Separation from Will Denton. Okay. Because David Parker, Colton ended up being his associate before he came to Nashville for Seth Mosley, being an intern with Seth Mosley. Mm-hmm. But David Parker, so he started working on Wednesday nights and wanted to play. And so Chris Clayton was the worship leader for the youth, Wednesday nights. So Colton started playing. Well, then he wanted to audition for the main worship band. So I remember the night that Colton went, he came back and I said, what'd they say? And they set Colton down because they were both mentors, have been mentors in life for Colton. And he said, well, they said, I just don't have my groove yet. I was like, what? I said, you're an excellent player. And they said, well, no, you just need to keep practicing, that you haven't found your groove yet. And it's amazing because they cared enough about Colton. They said, you're good, but you're not ready. And so he continued to work. And finally, one day he auditioned, and they had some great drummers that Colton, came home and said, hey, I made the band, that I'm in. They say I have my groove now. And so it's just cool that those cats, and that Colton has been impacted by your life, your music. And then David especially, and Chris. Of course, Chris is here in Nashville now. David should have probably, that's my gut feeling, he should have probably come to Nashville. He's amazing. But it's a small world. And then Euless, which you probably have mentioned probably the best thing that exists about the town, which I basically grew up in. But man, what a small world.
Yeah.
What's that? Well, on your Facebook page, and I know you don't get on because it's been like a couple of years since you posted, but
I know.
but it said that you're also friends with, I don't know, do you know Robert Ashford, bass player at the church, or did he just reach out to be a friend to you? Do you know?
I know him. I don't know him that well.
Right. Okay.
We're probably more Facebook friends than,
right. Okay.
than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but anyway, well, cool. Anything else, Colton, before we move on down the road?
No, you can keep on.
Okay, I just wanted to, because I did have a couple of questions. You're really kind of fill out the questionnaire. There's been like one person who hasn't, and there's I think a reason for it because of what he does for a living. But so I don't blame him. But it's always optional. I just want to give people an opportunity to kind of, give me a heads up. But you're so kind to fill it out. But really transparent. And there's a question I always ask on the pre-interview, questionnaire, that what would you say to 3 to 5 big ideas that you would like for our audience to know or catch or to do or feel as a result of our conversation? And you gave some responses that if you've got just a few more minutes, I'd like to, talk about. But the first thing you said, God is bigger than your dreams and can take you further than you ever imagined. And of course, the story about how your whole career started is a testimony of that. But let me ask you, how have you seen this truth fleshed out in your own experience, in your own life experiences? We know how you started. We know that you played with a plethora of people, which before we close, you may want to just, name drop some of the people that you play. You've already named a bunch. I know Tracy Lawrence, you said Leanne Rhymes, but still, how do you see that continuing to flesh out? Because I think are you 54? Do you mind me saying your age? You're 54 now, I guess. Are you 54?
No, you're a little bit off. I'm actually 29.
29. There you go.
No, 54 is.
I can edit that out. Do you want me to? I can edit that out. Are you okay with me talking about that?
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay,
yeah. I'm proudly 54. Yeah.
I'm proudly 64. But go ahead.
Yeah. So how is it playing out? Well, when I wrote that answer down, I was answering it in a sense to maybe, maybe people who are listening and maybe having some dreams, or have these dreams, whatever they might be. I also want to say that God can and will take you further, than you ever imagined. But I mean, that's not what that's not what he's here for. It's not. I just think our job is to be obedient and to follow him and to seek his will. I still at this ripe old age now, when I pray, I still have things that I want to do, accomplish, maybe even some changes. I want to see whether it's maybe a career path or something, or maybe an opportunity to play for so and so. But I still name a lot of things specifically in my prayers, and then I'm constantly reminded that I'm really supposed to just be praying for God's will to be done in my life. And
can you say that again? Your audio kind of glitched.
Oh,
what did you just say?
Well, I mean, I still to this day pray for a lot of specifics. I don't think there's anything wrong with naming specifics, to God as to, whether they're desires or exhortations or whatever. But at the same time, I'm just reminded that I'm really supposed to just be praying for God's will to be done in my life. And that's still a tough one for me sometimes, because I mean, we all have specifics, and I didn't grow up in some sort of name it and claim it, environment. Not at all. But I just feel like if anyone grabs anything from hearing bits and pieces of my story, I grew up in a farming community that didn't even have a traffic light in South Georgia. I started banging on pots and pans when I was 2 or 3. I got my first Holy drum kit when I was 4. And I did put in the time. I played drums every chance I got. I'm not exactly sure how my parents survived the mental and auditory assaults, that they faced every day, but they were very supportive. And all I ever kind of wanted to do was play drums. My sister is a doctor. She's an internationally published doctor. She's beautiful. I mean, what I'm getting at, she got the brains and the looks in the family. But we kind of had joked around about going into medicine at one point, together. And I just wanted to be a musician. And then when I became a Christian, I mean, it was just sort of a natural thing to want to serve God in whatever capacity I could, and I just felt like I was probably most qualified to do that musically. So yeah, I guess I wanted to just qualify that by saying if you could take a look at my life, I didn't have an exceptional pedigree. I didn't know anybody when I moved to Nashville. I didn't have an exceptional demo reel. I really didn't have anything going for me at all, except that I just felt like this is where God wanted me to be, and I just was going to be obedient and see where it played out. And to this day, when a younger person asks me, hey, should I move to Nashville? Should I pursue this? I tell them to a person, yes, you absolutely should. And if in doing so I give somebody bad advice, or maybe something that's contrary to God's will, I guess I'll have to answer for that. But when someone has that hunger, that passion in their heart, I think the worst thing you could find yourself, the worst place you could find yourself in someday would be to be 70, 75 and just be haunted by the what ifs. No, I could have done it. What if I just given it a shot? I tell most people, you may very well fall flat on your face. And in today's music economy and environment, you may be unpleasantly surprised to see what some of the bigger acts are paying these days, and how difficult it can be to genuinely make a living in music. I'll be honest with you, it would have to be, one of my top 3 opportunities for me to really go back out on the road again. Like top 5, okay, but it just has to. Nowadays, I feel like touring, especially, is a young person's game. I remember someone gave me this advice, and I didn't heed it, but I'll give it as well. If I were 22 years old and fresh out of school, whatever, and hungry to go on the road, I would put every single one of my possessions in storage. I would not have a rent. I would try definitely not to have a car payment. I would even ask some friends if I could sleep on their sofa when I'm in town, and I would work my tail off for 4 or 5 years and save up as much money as I could, and really get ahead. I'll tell you this, when I was working at Fort Strong Closet, I saw so many guys that were such talented players that would come into town, land a tour for 6 months, make 50 grand and think they were set for life, and they weren't. Then the phone wouldn't ring, for another 3 months or 4 months. So I didn't mean to turn this into a financial talk, but I just feel like musicians need to be good business people as well. One of the things I can say is that from my very first paycheck with DC Talk, I tithed 10% and I invested 10% of so I was living on 80% of my income. And I feel like that's pretty solid advice for anybody, no matter where your salary is coming from. But, give God his due. And I think he will bless you, just for that obedience.
In conjunction with that, something that you shared about yourself is that you don't seek to identify, your worth or who you are by what you do, and that you said that presently you're not doing music full time, and so you said you'd be glad to talk about what is going on in Will Denton's life right now. So I just opened the door for you to share anything that you want to share, because because I think God's speaking. I just kind of felt like, ooh, like it kind of came in on us here. So just whatever's on your heart, brother. I don't want to pry into your personal life. I have a great admiration for you. We've been talking about stuff, but anything you want to share about, it's an interesting statement to where, you're a quintessential musician, but presently it's not the center of your life right now. So I'm just curious, where is your life focus and what do you see God doing and where is he taking you? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, no, in the context of this conversation, me saying that I'm not doing music full time might seem like a slight pejorative or a negative thing. I don't want to make it sound like, well, I'm not doing music full time, right now, but man, fingers crossed, because that's where I don't want to make it sound like that. God, I've known and believed since I was a kid, godliness with contentment is a great gain. With the King James version, I just well, my story right now is this. I guess my last touring venture was about a year and a half on the road with the country artist Tracy Lawrence, and man, God, talk about just one big hit after another. That was a really fun tour. But two things really happened. Well, three things. I went through a divorce, and it was very painful. And when I was playing with Tracy, I think this is a really, really cool story. Probably the coolest story I'll tell. So back up about 10 years, I was on the road with this country duo called the Jane Deere Girls. And it was, I was in that camp, I was the band leader. I was also the tour manager, and I was probably more stressed. That was probably one of the most stressful experiences, trying to handle everything and manage the band and direct things. I just, that was a tough one. I loved the girls. I really, I did 2 music videos with them that were so fun. The only time in recorded history you'll ever see Will Denton in a cowboy hat is on the Jane Deere Girls Wildflower video. So I highly encourage everyone to pull it up on YouTube and have a fantastic laugh. It had rhinestones on the cowboy hat.
Nice.
I'm just letting you know. I still have it. Very proud of that. So, somewhere on a tour with the Jane Deere Girls, we found ourselves playing in Columbia, Missouri, at a little honky tonk there. Just one of a bazillion country bars in America, sticky floors and all. But we had an opening act that night, and all I can say is she was amazing, and she and her band opened for us, and I just was like, this girl is phenomenal. I'm just like, wow, blown away. And I went up to her after the show, kind of, I don't have a lot of trouble talking, but I was a little bit just kind of perplexed. I was just like, why aren't you in Nashville? I think that was the first thing I said to her. How smooth is that? But her name was Becky, and you may know her as Sweet Becky. Well, this was 2010. Becky and I met that night, and just sort of stayed in touch from time to time. We wrote a couple of songs together when she came to Nashville. I played percussion for her on a couple of writers' rounds. But I mean, there were stretches of time over a year, that we had no communication or any interaction. I mean, we were definitely just, we were friends. And then 2015 or somewhere along then, we just started talking again. And it was just a total God's timing thing. And now we're married, which is kind of hard to believe. So we have been married 5 years, and we live in Northeast Missouri. And funny enough, you said Paris, Texas. We're in Paris, Missouri. I think every state has a Paris for sure. It's just sort of a given. And we have a wonderful life there. And for now, that's where God has us. And maybe, who knows for how long, but we do music together. I get to play, percussion, drums, kind of a hybrid kit, piano, some little bit of bass, not much, but she plays acoustic, and we do a duo thing and some band gigs from time to time. But we have a great time doing music together. It's very satisfying and wonderful. So, but along the same time that Becky and I sort of just started, I guess, connecting a little bit on a deeper level, a friend of mine called me, one of my oldest and dearest friends, a great guitar player named Charles Garrett, and he asked me if I would be able to come down to his office and just help him out. The boss of his company had a pretty serious surgery, and Charles was doing 2 or 3 jobs, and could I help him out? Just even some invoicing and some paperwork, filing, simple stuff. I said, well, sure. Well, I got down to the office, and it was a company called Southern Billboards. I mean, I knew nothing about billboards. I had no background other than I looked at them on the side of the road, and I just was helping out with paperwork. But it was completely fascinating because these guys had all these signs in like 6 different states that they sold advertising on. And I was like, oh, so that's how that's how a billboard goes up. There's a company that has a board, and they reach out to somebody and they say, yes, I'd love to be on that sign and whatever. I was like, well, this is really cool. And not long after that, one of the other owners, there were 3 owners of the company, one of the other owners pretty much came to me and told me that I ran my mouth a lot, and had I ever thought about being in sales. And I said, I have not thought about it, but I would sure like to take a crack at it. And about 2 weeks later, I landed like a 6-month contract with Tennessee State University in Nashville. And thus began this crazy ride of being in the billboard industry that I am still doing and I really love. I have put up a lot of billboards in the last, 6 years. It's kind of crazy when I think about it. And that's what I'm doing right now. The reason I'm in St. Joseph, Missouri tonight is I am traveling out here to meet with people and talk to them about our wonderful signs and why they would benefit from being on them. It got to the point where I got so into it that I actually have my own LLC called Billboards. Thank you very much. And still very much operational. And I love it. So this is one of those situations where I didn't see it coming, and I think we all have those things, and I'm grateful for it. I really am. It's hard to quantify. The same way that being a musician is hard to quantify to the people that you grew up with in your small town that don't really understand what music is about. This is sometimes it's equally perplexing to quantify. Well, what do you mean you sell billboards? You actually sell signs? I'm like, no, I sell advertising space. You climb up on those things and hang them? I'm like, nope, I definitely don't do that. But so yeah, it's kind of crazy. Anytime now in Missouri when I'm traversing the state via I-70, I'm very fortunate. I have just an array of signs that are posted right now that I had something to do with, and it's kind of surreal to say that. So, and funny enough, when I took this job in Missouri, at this company here in Missouri, sweet Becky, took over the remaining inventory from the company in Nashville, and she's actually probably a better salesperson than I am. Yeah, she's much nicer on the phone, so, and much prettier. So she pretty much is outselling me. But you can drive around Nashville right now and see boards that she's put up. I mean, somebody is responsible for those things going up. It's kind of cool. It's like a little behind the scenes thing. Yeah. So that's where I am. I'm not saying that if Peter Gabriel called me, tonight, I'd probably drop everything to go do that. And if Becky and I could tour 200 shows a year, that might be a little much. But if we could, I want to do more music. Obviously, I do. But this is where I am, and I actually, I'm content. I really am. I just think that's part of life. I don't think I'd want to be 72 years old trying to make a living as a touring or even a session drummer. There might be some guys out there that can still do it, but when I mentally read the book that I haven't written yet, about my touring and music career that is still happening, I have a lot of. It's just gratitude. I don't have any real tell-all moments, or I'm not cynical. And I will tell you, when I was in college, I met some cynical old musicians, and I said, "Man, I don't ever want to be that. I don't ever want that happen." So, but that can be true of any profession. You can become cynical, and I think that's one of the other things I wrote. I said, just don't ever lose that sense of wonder at what God's doing. Don't lose the sense of waking up and every day is full of possibility. Even if you don't really feel that sometimes, you have no idea what's going to happen that day. You might think you do, but you really don't. And if you expect bad things, I think you'll probably swim in those waters. But if you know that God does love us and wants good things for his children, we don't always learn the greatest lessons when things are good. It's often the opposite. But when you know that God wants you to draw nearer to him, and that's nothing but a good thing, that's the best thing. When you know that that's really the ultimate accomplishment that you could attain that day, I just feel like everything else kind of falls into place. It's not a feel-good theology. Sometimes I have major doubts, and sometimes I'm angry at God, and sometimes why'd my mother die, or whatever. We all have pain that we process, and I think it's the lens through which we look at that pain and the challenges is ultimately. It ultimately determines, how we're going to come out on the other side. So,
well, I appreciate you sharing that, but you're of course still open because you are still performing musically.
Oh yeah,
so.
Yeah. That's just it. I don't want it to sound like listen, I just got these new old drums. I want to tell you about, Colton. I just got these new old drums, and I'm so excited every time I hit them. I get excited about a beautiful ride cymbal sound, or a snare drum that just kind of crosses your eyeballs when you hit it because it's just so cracky and full sounding. No. I haven't lost an ounce of enthusiasm for music or drumming. And to be honest, now that I'm not doing it every single day or whatever, I think I might even appreciate it a little bit more when I do get chances. The Heart Shakers just sold out the Franklin Theater a couple of weeks ago, just on our own. We played there, and Becky came and just slayed it, and we have some great memories. And Carrie Underwood's sound guy mixed our front of house sound, and it was massive. And these drums, I've been there. Oh man, well these drums, no. I'm a little weird about drums. I really am.
Tell us about that kit, and also, do you collect kits, or what's your favorite stuff? Endorsements, anything? Tell us about that here before we wrap up.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have to put this disclaimer out there. I do collect kits, but Becky cannot know about this. Can you edit that out? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we're running the edit back right now. Yeah.
Right. No. Okay. So you asked about this most recent kit. So, all right. In keeping with the whole Heartbreakers story, you know, I have pretty much since I started playing with these guys been on the lookout for an old set of Tama Imperial Star drums, just like Stan Lynch played. And Ty, being a drummer, and we're equally geeky about this, you know, he's been looking for me, and would, you know, he'd check reverb and all the classifiers and all this stuff. And I almost pulled the trigger on a couple of close but not really setups, because you can find Tama Imperial Stars if you look. But one day Ty messaged me and he said, like, exclamation points just for 16 lines on the screen. Here it is. And it was, I mean, spot on. 14 by 24, 10, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 18 floors. More drums than I'll ever need. And they were in Columbia, Tennessee. And I was in Missouri that day. I was like, Ty, I'll send you the money. Will you go pick them up? Will you please go pick them up? He goes, oh, you bet I will. He was dying just like I was. And all I can tell you is they are in immaculate condition. When I play with the Heart Checkers now, it's just a 13 rack and 16 and 18. I may add another one. Now he would occasionally do that, but it is so authentic and massive sounding. And ironically, let me draw the circle here. My first real, pro level kit when I was a kid was a black set of Tama Imperial Stars with that many drums and more, including the Octobons. Remember the Octobons? I wish I still had them, of course, but like everyone else, you sell it to get the next big thing. You sell that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, I remember when I was a kid and I finally landed on these real drums, like I would call them, like the actual pro level drums. I remember feeling just how good they felt to play. And after I got to Nashville, I moved to Nashville with a set of Tama Superstars, which were gorgeous drums. I sold them, and then I got into these touring situations where I've been a Peisty guy. I have been a true blue Peisty cymbal guy since 1992. That's all I've ever played. But I have really jumped around on drum kits, and it's not because I'm insatiable, but I'm just always looking for what's the perfect drum sound or whatever, if there is such a thing. But I kind of have come full circle back to these Tama Imperial Stars, and man, I am so excited every time I just hit that kick drum. It's like right here in my chest, and it's not too deep. I've been playing these super deep kick drums, 18s, 16, 18s. This is a 14 by 24, and I can do things technique wise in that drum I've never been able to do on just about any other drum. So except that 12 by 20, which was amazing. Still have that. Yeah. Yes, I collect drums, but I try not to be. I don't collect that many. I really don't. So, but yeah. So I pretty much have the Stan Lynch drum set, and it feels so good. Feels so good. Yeah.
What year did you say that kit was?
Somewhere in the 80s. I mean, like when I was growing up, my favorite drummers were Alex Van Halen and Stuart Copeland of the Police. Nobody sounded like Stuart Copeland to me. That I could immediately identify his playing. I knew right away who it was. And he played a black set of Tama Imperial Stars. And he probably had more to do with me wanting to play Tamas than anybody else. But I loved Alex Van Halen. I loved Stuart Copeland. I was a hairband guy. I loved the Scorpions and Rat. And I just wanted to be a rock and roller.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So being in the 80s, are they really heavy? Is it still the old growth wood? Yeah.
It's heavy. Yeah, they're heavy. I don't mind it though, the way they sound. I just don't.
Yeah.
They're so I actually haven't tracked them yet. I can't wait to record them. I really can't. So
yeah. Yeah, there's something about the dent, and see, yeah, this is why he was saying we're not going to talk gear because we're going to start devolving. But
that's okay. That's okay.
No, it's just something about the density of those older drums that it just, in my opinion, it just causes them to speak in a different way. You know what I mean? It's like an old guitar has just a different. I don't even know. It's not even tone. It's just like silkiness in a way. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember when I was working at Forks, you know, somewhere around that time, they made that huge discovery of that gigantic cache of wood at the bottom of Lake Superior. Do you remember this? You may be too young. Well, they found all this wood submerged, you know, in Lake Superior, and all these drum companies started making these outrageous bids on the wood, and Drum Workshop got it, and they made like I don't know, 100 drum sets from them, and they were like $10,000 a piece or more, and we got one at Forks, and I do remember thinking, well, it sounded wonderful, but it also sounded just like, just from a different era in the best possible way. They didn't sound like any other drums in the shop, and we had a ton of drums there. But I remember thinking, "Oh gosh, I wish I had $10,000 at the time." So,
well, brother, I tell you, you've been so kind. We've gone over time, but as you've been talking, my brain is just popping with more and more questions, and you know that there's so much here. And so I've restrained because we could go for 4 or 5 hours. But I thank you so much for being on the show, Will. And I'd like to extend an invitation to you to come back at a later date, and we can pick up the conversation. And you've been so encouraging to us personally, and to my son, who's a drummer. But then also, I really feel like that this is going to really connect with a lot of people who are needing words of encouragement and needing inspiration. So thank you, my friend, for joining us tonight.
Oh man, I thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And it is no small thing to me that you wanted to talk to me in the first place. Super humbling, and just fills my heart with gratitude that I have the opportunity to speak from whatever position this might be. I promise you, like, I experienced road fatigue and homesickness and a lot of things while I was on the road, but I never got nonchalant about, oh man, I got to go play a show with Stephen Curtis Chapman. I still cannot believe that that I got to do that, and yeah, it's super surreal to be having this conversation with you. But I'm grateful, and the thing is like I'd welcome a chance just to just have a further dialogue, of course, and hear more about y'all's stories. And to me, the shows were themselves, immensely gratifying in so many ways. But it was always the people that I got to meet and interact with, off stage, that made everything just so much richer. I'm reconnected with a lady, this family that I had met way early on in my Christian music days, and we hardly talked, but we reconnected, and I was. It's a long story, but I was able to send a signed picture of an artist from Nashville to a young lady that really wanted it up in Michigan, and I was just so grateful to be able to do that, and I'm so glad I met that family. And I have friends, I feel like genuine friendships that all over the country, and some places, other countries, where people that I got to meet and interact with and find the common ground with, yeah, I really am grateful that I got to talk to you guys tonight, and I'd be happy to come back.
Awesome, man. Well, with that, this is a wrap, and with that, I bid you peace.